Right, hello everyone. Today I want to dive into a topic that I think is absolutely fascinating, the difference between state and trait constructs. Now, if you're not familiar with these terms, don't worry. I'm going to break it down for you in a way that I hope will be really relatable and engaging. First of all, let's talk about what a construct is. In psychology, a construct is essentially the thing that we're trying to measure. It's the concept or the idea that we want to understand and assess. So, for example, if we're looking at human belonging, that would be the construct that we're interested in. Now, the key difference between state and trait constructs is all about flexibility and consistency. A trait construct is something that's inherent, it's rigid, it's consistent over time and across different situations. It's that core part of who you are that doesn't really change, regardless of where you are or who you're with. But a state construct is much more flexible. It's the part of you that can change depending on the situation. So, for example, you might behave very differently when you're with your family versus when you're with your friends. That's your state characteristics coming into play. And we see this all the time in real life, don't we? Think about anxiety, for instance. We know that people can experience both state and trait anxiety. Trait anxiety is the baseline level of anxiety that someone experiences all the time, regardless of the situation. But then there are certain situations that can trigger a higher level of state anxiety. Maybe it's public speaking or a job interview or even just a crowded room. And, this is something that's really important to understand because it can have a huge impact on how we approach things like mental health and well-being. According to a recent study by the Mental Health Foundation, around 74% of people in the UK have felt so stressed at some point over the last year that they felt overwhelmed or unable to cope. And I think a big part of that is understanding the difference between state and trait constructs and how they can influence our thoughts, our feelings and our behaviours. Because if we can recognise that certain situations or environments might be triggering a higher state of anxiety or stress, then we can start to put strategies in place to manage that. Maybe it's taking a few deep breaths before a big meeting or having a support system in place for when things get tough. And on the flip side, if we understand our trait characteristics, the inherent parts of ourselves that don't change, then we can start to build on those strengths and really embrace who we are. So in summary, state and trait constructs are all about flexibility versus consistency. They're the building blocks of who we are, and understanding the difference between the two can be absolutely transformative, both on an individual level and in terms of how we approach things like mental health and well-being in our society. It's a fascinating topic and one that I think we could dive into for hours.